G'day everyone, welcome to DB Life Outdoors and what is a slightly different video to what we've done in the past. Now recently, and I mean right now, I've got an opportunity to install a product that I'm going to say I've been able to test very long term. In fact, about 20 odd years. And I like it so much that I'm about to install the fourth one. So that's how good I think they work. It's a product that back in the day was, it stirred a lot of conversation, let's say that, around campfires and internet forums and that sort of thing about whether they actually work, whether it's a gimmick, is it a scam, how good are they, all these sorts of things. And I decided for myself, with my background in what I do for work, that I reckon it's a good enough product to give it a go. What is that product? Glad you asked. It's one of these. Yep, the old electronic rust protection. In particular, this one, the ERPS. As I said, about 20 years ago, I think I installed the very first one. And that went into my 2003 Nissan Patrol GU wagon. And of course, if you follow us on the channel, you'll notice that that's actually the one that Wayno now currently owns. So having something in the family for 20 odd years means you get to test some of these things pretty well. And it wasn't long after I bought it, I stuck one of these things in. And so that's a pretty good test for one of these. A little bit of background on myself, and what I will do is I'll start off by saying I'm not sponsored by ERPS. I'm under no contractual agreements to say really good stuff about their product. This is purely my experience with the product and why I'm going to put another one in, and I'll actually show you the results. So to start off, I'll give you a bit of a background as to my experience, I guess. What I do for a living. So I'm a industrial electrical fitter mechanic as one trade, and also have instrumentation fitter as a second trade. Now what that means basically is I have to deal with a lot of multi-million-dollar machines. I work in the food and beverage industry, and it's up to me to maintain these machines, repair them when they break down, and basically keep them running. What that does is it gives me a very good knowledge base for electrical stuff and electronics. So when I started going down the track of electronic rust protection, I was able to use that background to say, well, how skeptical do I need to be? Is it something that I think would actually work? And it's kind of a knowledge where I went, yeah, I actually could see how this works. Now, unfortunately, Wayno has gone on a work trip. He's way up in far north Queensland, so I can't show you the results on his vehicle. But what I can do is show you the results on my vehicle. So about 14 years ago, I bought my Patrol, GU Patrol Ute, and it was about, I'd say it was 18 months to 2 years after I put electronic rust protection on this, after seeing how well it was working on my previous wagon. And I didn't hesitate to put it on. And so this one's been on here, yeah, you're looking at about 12 years. So the results of that, even after 12 years, are pretty amazing in my book. If you look at the bodywork, there's no rust in it anywhere. All the spots where you would normally see rust, especially in a Patrol, absolute zero rust. It's also the chassis rails. Those chassis rails, to me, not a skerrick of flaky rust. Now, I've got to say, the amount of beach work that both Wayno's and my Patrol have done. So Wayno's has done probably around, we estimate, maybe a couple of thousand Ks in total over those years. Mine, I'm going to say somewhere between the 1,000 to 1,500 K mark. That includes places like Bribie Island, Stradbroke Island, Moreton Island, Fraser Island, many trips, You're looking at Tiwa Beach, Double Island Point, all the usual ones. We're also talking both the east and western sides of Cape York, as well as the salt pans up in the Gulf country up there in the Northern Territory. So plenty of opportunities to create rust. Underneath, as I said, chassis rails. Have a look at those. We've got, if you look at the exhaust system, to me, that exhaust system went on only a couple of weeks after I bought the ute, so it's still looking around that 14-year mark. And it's still the original 3-inch exhaust that I put in. It's in great condition and doesn't look like giving out anytime soon. One of the other things that really surprised me, and I've only just, honestly, I only just noticed it when I was putting this video together in my head, and I had a look under my car and I saw this. Have a look at that. That there is stone chips on the fuel tank coming off the back tyre. If we look through here, you can see straight in there. Those stone chips have hit bare metal, and there is not even surface rust on it. I don't know how long that's been there for, because it's been a long time since I've painted it. It's not a skerrick of rust. And that brings me to one of the advantages of electronic rust protection, is when you think about your traditional systems where they'll spray something, you know, to coat the panels so that oxygen doesn't touch the panels, all sorts of stuff. You can only spray that in areas you can physically get to. And one of those places you can never get to, you can't put them, is inside your fuel tanks. And if you're like me, like this rig here, it's not my daily driver, so it does spend a bit of time sitting at home in the shed. If you're sitting there with not a lot of fuel in the tank, that tends to be the time when rust will start inside your tank. Of course, that flakes off, gets caught in your fuel systems, causes other issues. Electronic rust protection doesn't care about where it's going in that metal. So it starts from the inside, and it protects inside your fuel tanks as much as anywhere else, providing your fuel tank's contacting the chassis and you've got pads on the chassis, which I'll get to a bit later on. But that is one of the major advantages I've found with this, and looking at those stone chips and seeing that there's zero rust on there. I need to fix that up, by the way. I will paint that. But how good is that? And to me, it shows why I really believe in these systems. Now, why am I telling you all this? And that's a good question. As I said before, I'm about to install the 4th one. And what is that going into? Well, I kind of did a thing. And I went and bought myself a WeGo. Now, I'm not going to do a whole video on the WeGo. That will come up when I can get together with Wayne. We can sit around and talk about it, because, spoiler alert, he got one too. When I got underneath this thing and had a look, there's a lot going on under there. And to show you what I mean, we'll get in on underneath. So when I got in underneath this thing, I could see all the little places that salt and sand is going to catch. We've got, you know, chassis rails, and there's tanks and guards and all sorts of stuff. And looking at that and all the places that it can get caught, it's hard to clean out, means that I thought, well, I'm going to need some pretty serious rust protection in this. And obviously the first thing I thought of was the ERPs. There is a second reason, and the second reason is this camper is manufactured overseas. It's not manufactured here in Australia, so the quality of the steel can be questionable. I've certainly seen some results of some pretty ordinary steel. So for that reason, I thought it doubly needs protection and something that works from the inside out. So what is electronic rust protection? Well, firstly, we kind of need to understand what rust is. Think about a tree falls over in the bush somewhere. There's a process that starts to make that tree decay back into the soil, and the process of that decaying is generally used by microorganisms. So it's breaking it down into basically matter that goes back into the soil. Now, metal does the same sort of thing. It has a process of decaying. Now, that isn't caused by microorganisms, it's caused by chemical reaction. And that chemical reaction comes from the atmosphere that it's in. It requires oxygen, requires moisture. But if you add salt to that equation, so you've got salt air, it will speed up that chemical process a lot. If you take away the salt air and replace it with salt water, it increases even further. And even acids and stuff in soils, muds, all that sort of stuff will create this chemical reaction. Now what happens in that chemical reaction is the air is essentially stealing electrons out of the metal. Now all metal has electrons. It's what we use for electricity, it's what we use for current flow. It's a manipulation of electrons. We move that through the system, that gives us our current flow. So anything that is electrically conductive, like metal, is full of electrons. But what happens is with the rusting and the corrosion process is those electrons are actually removed out of the metal. And what's left is what you see as rust. It's the decaying matter, it's the flakiness or the dust, all that sort of stuff. That's actually what is left as a result of metal having its electrons removed. So it's an electrical process as much as a chemical process. What the ERPS does, they use what they call capacitive coupling. Now, capacitive coupling isn't one of those fancy terms made up by the marketing department that you'd see on some 24-hour shopping channel on TV. Capacitive coupling is actually electronics theory, and the way it essentially works, if you think about a bucket of water, so if you think our metal as a bucket of water, the corrosion process is essentially a hole in that bucket. So that bucket starts then losing its water and our level starts going down. What these electronic rust systems do is essentially, if you think about, it's got a couple of different items. We've got this black magic box here, that's like a water pump, if you think about a water pump, and this plate here, if you think about that as a tap. So what it does is it will put water, you turn the tap on, so as the water's flowing out of the bucket, this is turning the tap on and filling the bucket back up to keep it full. Whenever we do that, we have no rust. Essentially it's neutralizing the rust. As long as we can keep up with what's going out and keep topping it up with new water or electrons going in, then we'll neutralize the rust. And that's essentially what these electrical systems are doing. How it does that with capacitive coupling, it has two plates. So it uses, generally capacitive coupling has two plates. It'll have a positively charged one and negatively charged one just off a battery with a bit of insulation between, and that's called a dielectric. But what it does is it creates, by putting a charge on there on the negative side, because electrons are a negatively charged atom, what it does is it basically floods that negative side with electrons. And so what we can do, what they do with these systems, is by flooding it with electrons, as the electrons are moving out through our corrosion process, this is moving in to fill those voids. It's filling that spot that those electrons left, just like our bucket of water. So it uses this as a generator, that's our electron generator, and it has a pad here. This one becomes a positively charged plate. And then we use the metal that we're actually trying to protect, so the body of our vehicle, the chassis of our vehicle, whatever, that becomes our negative plate. So by flooding that with electrons, as they get pulled away by the corrosion process, we're basically replacing them. And that in a nutshell is how it works. Now, one of the things that I remember from 20 years ago doing these things is it was pretty important. It was one of the stipulations when you put these things, is you still have to wash your vehicle. And a lot of people would say, well, how do I know it's working? If I'm washing it, won't that be enough to stop the rust? And the answer is basically, as I said, you use that fuel tank for example. You can't wash inside a fuel tank. You can't. So many of these nooks and crannies that you have in the chassis rails and inside your body panels are so hard to flush out with water. That's generally where the rust starts, and the rust always starts on the inside of anything and then moves its way out, unless it's something like a stone chip where it can start on the outside and move in. But those ones are the easy ones to touch up. So it's important to touch up stuff. Now, what happens is, and when you look at having to wash something, and it is pretty important, is when we use our bucket analogy, the more area that is covered in salt and sand essentially is more area that holes can form in our bucket. So we end up with lots and lots and lots and lots of holes in the bucket, which means lots and lots of water coming out, which means lots of electrons removed from our metals. And these systems, these electronic systems, they come in multiple pads. So you've got in this one between 2 and 10 pads as a kit, but the whole system, I believe, can take up to 20 pads, which is pretty good. But if you think of each one of those pads as a tap, so I have a 6-pad system going in this, my ute has a 6-pad system, Wayno's wagon has a 6-pad system. Think of each one of those pads as a tap. So now I have 6 taps pouring into my bucket, which will do a really good job of holding any rust and corrosion at bay. But if you overload the bucket, if you put way too many holes in, if you turn your bucket into a sieve, then there's only so much those taps can do. So essentially, instead of neutralizing the rust, what will happen is it'll just slow the process down, because it can only supply so many. As I said, the electron generator itself is like a pump. It can only pump so much, and that's it. So it's why it's important not to have so much salt, sand and everything on your vehicle and not wash it off. We just need to not create so many holes in our bucket that the system can't handle it. Everything in life has a limitation, and basically that's the limitation. But while you're doing that, while you're washing as much as you can, getting all that salt out, what it means is all the places you can't get to should be covered by our herbs. I hope that kind of explains exactly what it's about. I'm about to get stuck into this and install it. I won't bore you with all the drilling holes or sticking things on or whatever else, but I will come back and show you the end result. Stick around. When you crack one of these, that means the job's done. It's a pretty simple affair actually. I'll run you through it, show you what I've done. So if we head on inside here, inside the big box of electrical goodies, right down there is the electron generator. See here, red light on means it's working, it's operational, everything's good to go. Powered off just straight off the fuse block right next to it, which was pretty handy. From there's 2 cables that just run straight down through the floor, and those 2 cables, essentially, they end up being a big loop. Buck back out here. Underneath the camper, there's a loop that runs all the way around the chassis and back up through the second cable into the generator. And from there, each pad just tees off from that loop. So I've got the 6 pads, so the tees off in 6 places. Those pads, have a look under here. So as you can see, we've got it's nicely painted here, and the pads just over the top of that. That's essential to have that paint and that insulation between the bare metal, or the metal you're protecting, and the pad itself. These just stick on. They're just a sticky backing you peel off and stick on, and you'll notice there's actually silastic or silicone running around the outside. Again, important just simply because it stops dirt, mud, salt, sand, water, anything getting in between this and the metal that can cause issues down the track. If there's a bit of a short between the metal, if it wears away or there's a bit of paint exposed or whatever, the system will shut down. So that red light we're looking at will turn off, and you'll know there's an issue. So this just stops anything getting in from behind there, and that way that will stay there for a very long time. And there's 6 of those pads running all around the perimeter of the chassis. Now, there is one issue with galvanizing, and I'll jump out and I'll run you through it. So if you just happen to have a galvanized chassis on your camper or your caravan, there's a bit of an extra step that you need to take for this system to work. And it's because of an anomaly that the galvanizing has. Now, as I said, if you've got your bare metal, I'll use this card to represent paint. So we've painted it, and this is our pad. Once that goes on, you've got your insulation material here to go between your pad and your base metal, and that's all good. But because galvanizing itself is a really good electrical conductor, so it actually, electrons move through that very freely. What happens is the electrons are generated just underneath the surface of this paint. It gets out, moves out to this section here where it's all exposed to air, and essentially your electrons will dissipate and they'll be absorbed by that atmosphere, and it kind of short circuits the system. So that can be a little bit of an issue for having this work, but the step to fix that is actually quite simple, because all we need to do is just paint your galvanized chassis. I know it sounds easy. Bit of etch primer, a layer of paint, and paint your chassis. Then what that does is insulates the galvanizing now from the atmosphere, and then your electrons can just fill up your bucket, and they'll just travel around, moving to wherever it's needed when it's needed. I've been pretty fortunate because on my trailer, not only is it galvanized, it's already comes painted from the manufacturer. I hope this video has helped to explain and maybe help your understanding of how these systems work. There's a lot of science involved in these things, so it's not just a little bit of fairy dust sprinkled on some hopes and dreams and hoping that'll be okay. I'm a big fan. As I said, I looked into it 20 odd years ago, and for my purposes at least, I've seen it work. So I did not hesitate to stick it on here. So hopefully in another 20 years time, I'll be doing another video showing just how good this one looks. Until then, get outside, enjoy the great outdoors, and remember, there's no refunds on life unlived. Cheers.